Hey everyone, I'm Angie from Courageous Mom, and for a while now I've been wanting to share with you my story of loss, pregnancy loss and miscarriage, and so I thought one of the best ways to do that might just be to shoot a video where I just tell you my story. So any of you who have been following me for very long at Courageous Mom know that we have 7 kids that are alive and well, and they are 17 and a half years old all the way down to 2. But what some of you may or may not know is that we also lost a baby, and it was actually just less than a year ago. We were so excited to get pregnant with our 8th. The kids were like, oh, we're going to be the Tolpin 10. And if you have older kids and you've walked through this, you know that the grief process is just different. It's just different because everybody plans and dreams about what the rest of life is going to be like with that baby and with that person growing up with them. And the longer that you're pregnant, the longer and the bigger that those dreams become, and the more invested you become. And so we were pregnant, and we lost our baby at 13 weeks. And it had been a really stressful year for sure, but there was like no signs that there was anything wrong with the baby. For the longest time, I was sick. Like I was sick with all the other kids for the first part of the pregnancy. I remember sitting in church and my husband just asking for people to pray over me because I was so sick. And we had so much that we needed to do. My husband's company had just gone out of business, and there was a lot that we were trying to take care of. We were selling our house in hopes that it wouldn't foreclose, and it was a hard season. And I'll never forget the day that I thought something was wrong. So about 2.5 weeks before, actually 3 or 4 weeks before we announced on social media and to like our extended friends that we were expecting our 8th baby. And so we had waited until we were like 11, 12 weeks to tell people. And we told them just like a few weeks, and then a few weeks later I lost the baby, but I actually didn't know that I lost the baby because the placenta kept growing. And so my hormones, like there was just something off, and my body wasn't birthing the baby, even though the baby had died, and I didn't know it. And so for the last few weeks of that period of time before I had my actual miscarriage, I wasn't very sick anymore, and I just thought that God had answered the prayers of the saints and that I wasn't sick anymore. But it was really that the baby had died, and my body was just confused. So on that day, when I first experienced symptoms, I went out to my husband, and I remember saying, I have some bad news, and he said, I do too. And we were potentially facing a lawsuit. And I said, I think the baby died. I need you to take me to the doctor right away. Talk about a hard moment in time. And so our oldest daughter was babysitting for some good friends, and we didn't want the kids at home alone. So we asked them if they could all go over there. And of course they were like, yeah, bring them. And so we dropped our kids off, and then Isaac took me to the doctor's office for an ultrasound. And all the way there, I just remember we had silence in the car, and I was just praying that the baby was going to be okay. And Isaac was holding my hand tight. He prayed for us, and he prayed for the baby. and I was abnormally silent. And then he put music on because he knows that I love to worship the Lord, and it leads my heart when I need to lead my heart, to keep my eyes on him. So he put the radio on. And immediately there was this song that I had always thought was so annoying. So I was like, and I changed the channel, and it was the same song on a different channel. And I said, so I shut the radio off. And Isaac looked at me and he said, I think God's trying to tell you something. You need to listen to this. And he turned it back on. And it was Torn Wells, Hills and Valleys song. And that was really the first time that I gave that song a fair chance. And the lyrics just ministered so much to my soul. When we arrived at the clinic, we walked in and checked in, and the clerk, the customer service lady, knew right away why we were there. She could see it all over our face, and she looked like she was going to cry. And then we went back for the ultrasound, and I saw the baby on the screen, but there was no heartbeat. There was nothing quite like that moment. I didn't want to leave. I just wanted to look at her. I didn't want it to be true. But she had no heartbeat. And she just looked perfect. My husband just held my hand and prayed, and the technician left and came back and then said the doctors would meet with you, and they proceeded to tell us that the baby had died and what our options were, which I've never had that conversation personally before, what my options were. And it was scary. You guys, it was scary. And in that moment, I was filled with guilt and questions and shame. And I was scared. I was worried about how my kids would take it. So the doctor told us that we had options, and that we could either go home and birth the baby naturally, or we could have a drug that would make the baby come out, or I could have a surgery called a D&C. And in that moment, I realized that I felt like such a failure. And it was like the devil was just attacking me with all kinds of lies. So, of course, we chose the first option, to come home and birth the baby naturally. There was just no way I would want those other things. And the unfortunate thing is that we got really bad advice, because the baby had been dead for a few weeks already. And the thing that most people don't tell you is that the longer the fetus is not alive inside of you, the more the toxins are released into your blood, and the greater chance you have of hemorrhaging. And I just wish that doctor knew that. So after we left the room, it was silent. It was like the whole staff obviously had been talking. They all knew we had lost our baby, and everyone was very downcast and so sad. And my husband and I, we decided that instead of going and picking up our kids right away, we needed to go and sit and talk and plan. We needed to talk. So we went to a diner, and we sat for about an hour and a half. And during that time, my husband pulled out the Bible, and we read through all of James. And as we were reading through the book of James, we really meditated on the passage in scripture that says, "Count it all joy, my brethren, when you meet trials of various kinds. For in it produces steadfastness." How hard to walk through this trial, though. So we sat and we prayed, and we determined that we would glorify God and that we would teach our children how to grieve. That we would let them grieve however God wanted them to, had made them to, and that we would try to lead them. And then we drove to go pick them up. And I remember telling my oldest daughter, she just was so anxious, saying, "Is baby okay?" We were in the middle of the street as everybody else was getting in the car. And I just shook my head no, and she just started crying and she fell in my arms. See, the thing people don't know is that when you lose a baby and you have older kids, sometimes you have to pause your grieving to help them. And it makes that process so much harder. And that was just the beginning. So we came home, and the kids were in the house, and that night, I'll never forget, the doctor said, "Make sure you get a lot of rest tonight and you drink lots of water." Well, my baby was vomiting all night long, and he didn't want to be anywhere but on my chest. So I didn't get any rest, and I got no water. And then the next day, our 12-year-old started in vomiting as well. And she was in so much pain. She was in excruciating pain. So I called our doctor and I made an appointment for her. And by this time, I still had not fully started bleeding. And I took her to the doctor's office, and my husband was really watching me like a hawk. So his instincts told him to take me and everybody else in the car, and that I would go into the doctor's office and then he'd drive us home. And I'm really glad he did, because while we were in the doctor's office, I had one cough. I just coughed once and I gushed. I just hemorrhaged. And that was the beginning. And it was all over me. All down my pants. And I walked out to the car and I told Megan to tell the doctor I'm sorry, I had to hurry. And I walked out to the car. We drove back home thinking that it wouldn't take very long, just a couple hours. And I just kept hemorrhaging and hemorrhaging and hemorrhaging for 9 hours straight. And in that amount of time, I just knew that something wasn't right and that it shouldn't be this much. But every other miscarriage I'd been at was so much earlier than mine that I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm farther along. And so we called the doctors multiple times, and they kept saying to just sit on the toilet. And then finally a different advice nurse said, no, you need to be wearing a pad because you need to measure how much blood loss you have. And if it fills more than one pad in an hour, you need to go to the ER. And she said, call me in an hour. Well, I didn't make it an hour. 5 minutes before that hour alarm went off, I passed out and fell off the toilet and hit my head. And my husband, fortunately, was right there, and he was trying to catch me, and he tried to get me awake, and he called the ambulance, the ER, and they weren't going to be able to get to us for at least 17 minutes. So he made the executive decision to pile me in the truck and get me to the hospital as fast as he could. And he did. He got me there really fast. And we brought our oldest daughter with us because I was having a hard time staying awake. I kept passing out. And so she came, and of course the doctors, I had lost too much blood and I could barely raise my head. And so they lowered my head on the bed to keep me awake. And every time I had to sit my head up to sign paperwork, I'd pass out. So of course they got me on an IV right away. And to be honest, a lot of it's foggy. They tried to stop the bleeding, but it wasn't working. And so the doctor came in, who was on call, the surgeon, and he said right away that I needed to have surgery. And I have to tell you that I did not want that surgery. I thought I'd always associated having a D&C with abortion. I didn't know. And so I just felt like I couldn't. Even though the baby had already come out and my husband had spent so many hours looking for the baby with a flashlight. And we knew she was already out. But you see, I always believed that it was an abortion, so I just couldn't, even though the baby was gone and in heaven with Jesus already. After 9 hours of hemorrhaging, all that was left was blood clots. And I'll never forget, my husband called one of our elders, and he put his wife on the phone. Now this is like 2 a.m. And she said to me, Angie, Selah is in heaven with Jesus, and now you need to stay alive so you can take care of your other kids. And then she said this really important thing to me. She said, I had a D&C. If I can do it, you can do it. You're going to make it. And in that moment, it was like I was able to say, okay, it was exactly what I needed to hear. I needed to hear that a godly woman that I respected was saying it was okay. So I had the surgery. But before the surgery, I remember the doctor saying, you've lost a lot of blood. We need to give you a blood transfusion. You've lost way too much. And then they took my blood and they took me in for surgery. And just before I went under for the surgery, he said to me, okay, if there's something you want to pray for, pray to live and pray that I can save your uterus. And I remember rolling into that operating room. I remember the look on our landlord's faces when they came to see me at the hospital and how sheet white they looked when they looked at me in that hospital bed. I think they thought I was going to die. I remember the look on Kelsey's face, my daughter, and Isaac's, and the doctors. And when I woke up from the surgery, the first thing I said was, did you save my uterus? And he looked at me and said, you are crazy. I saved your life. But yeah, I saved your uterus too. But he said, you're not out of the woods yet. You need more blood. And they proceeded to tell us that I had lost somewhere around like 67% of my blood or something in the hemorrhage. It's an enormous amount of blood. I was so weak. we had a lot of people praying. And then when I came home, that's when the real grieving started. And the healing. And the Lord, we named a baby Selah Rose. And I share the story in a different blog post about how we were sitting at the table and how I didn't want to name her that because I had always dreamed of having a little girl named Selah. And I felt like I was bearing that dream in addition to my baby. But how all my kids were like, Mom, you know that was her name. So then I started looking up every Bible verse in Scripture that says Selah, because I just wanted to know her. And every time I found another verse in Scripture, it just pointed more to the character of God and who He is. My daughter from heaven was pointing me to God. And I craved it. I craved reading Scripture, and so I spent so many hours in the Word and listening to worship music and crying out to Him and praying because I couldn't go anywhere. I was on bed rest from losing so much blood, and God was calling me to a season of rest in Him. During that time, each of our kids was grieving differently. My husband was grieving differently. It was a long road. It's a long story. But I have to tell you that writing and sharing is healing for me. And searching God's Word and digging into the Word and just being in His presence alone, it healed my heart. And then a few weeks later, after I'd been posting and sharing with you all and reading your prayers and your emails and how our story was ministering to so many of you guys that have also suffered loss and felt like you were not able to grieve because this world just doesn't value unborn babies. Our culture doesn't even view them as babies, but they're babies. When you let yourself feel that way, you realize how much the human heart is capable of loving. And it's really beautiful. So my husband decided to plan a little ceremony. And we went to celebrate Selah. And so we popped all the kids in our RV and we headed to the beach, and we had a special ceremony for her. And we all said our goodbyes. We praised God and we sang worship music together on the beach, and we prayed, and everybody had a rose to put in the ocean, and they had alone time to just think about her and talk to God about her. And then the kids and Isaac went back to the RV, and I just spent an hour or two more on the beach. And it was really healing for me too. And so I hope that by sharing my story, that you are somehow encouraged or educated. Miscarriages can be dangerous. They are painful. And our babies are real babies. They were members of our family. and their dreams gone, but their treasures in heaven. In 1 Thessalonians 4:13 says, he says, "For then I speak to you that you not be uninformed like those who do not understand, those who are asleep and have no hope. We don't grieve the same as the world." We grieve like believers. And it's okay to grieve. And it's healthy to grieve. It's what makes us human. And it's an emotion that God gave us because we're made in His image. And grieving takes time. It's been about 8 months. And I'm telling you, the things that are hard are like when you see a brand new baby. There were a few babies that were born around my due date. It was hard. Being a birth doula, I almost wanted to just quit. But each birth that I've gone to since I lost Selah has healed my heart. It's healed my heart. And then when I came upon her due date on November 25th, that day was just hard. It was just hard. That week was hard. Because I knew that if she was alive, I would have been holding a new baby. But I wasn't. So there were aspects of Christmas that were hard. But life is so precious, and it's worth celebrating. So if you need encouragement from loss, I have a few blog posts on Courageous Mom that might minister to you. One is called "We Will Worship While We Weep." And it has 20, 30 songs that I've listened to that minister to me during loss. And there's another one called "Giving Thanks When You're Grieving," in the midst of grieving, because that's what God calls us to in His Word. And there's a few other posts, but I just want you to know you're not alone, and that it's okay to grieve, and it's okay to never be the same again. You can still have joy and still choose joy just like you had to before. You can still enjoy babies and friends and pregnancies and baby showers, but you'll never forget. And it can make you a better person because of it, actually. So let it make you a better person. And let it draw you closer to the one who can deliver you.